Welcome to Minnesota.
You people, you think it's really cold. It is the middle of April. It is just beautiful outside. It's at least negative 15. You Californians.
Home of the Gophers? I just realized that I'm not even sure what Minnesota is known for. I'm from Alabama, so although I played my college football in Michigan, Minnesota was never on my to-do list. So just like everyone else who wants to know something about anything, I went to Google. Aha! F. Scott Fitzgerald, the first American to win the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature. He's famous for writing The Great Gatsby, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio, the movie. Almost 100 years ago, though. And that's about it.
That's it?
Oh, yeah, the twins. Forgot about that. All right. So in 1960, when this fairly new league called the NFL expanded to Minneapolis, people had to be excited, right? Not necessarily. See, early in the 1900s, Minneapolis did have a professional football team called the Minneapolis Marines. They actually went on a 34-0 regular season tear from 1913 to 1917. But in 1918, the team lost most of its players to the flu pandemic going on during that time period, plus, of course, World War I, causing them to have to cancel the season. Although the team did start back the next year, the team eventually folded in 1924 from issues caused by that time. Now in 1929, the team did try to resurface again. However, this time they called themselves the Minneapolis Red Jackets, but only lasted 2 seasons.
Some of you think there's not very much more to Minnesota than snow. You think snow's all we got. You think this is all Minnesota is. Well, you're correct. There's just snow. It's quite depressing, actually.
Now, let's fast forward back to 1961. They have their new team, and they decided to call them the Minnesota Vikings. In the team's first full season, they drafted Hall of Famer Fran Tarkenton, Russell Wilson before Russell Wilson.
When I saw quarterbacks when their protection broke down just to give up and fold themselves in the pocket and accept a 7 or 8 yard loss and go to the next play. And if you didn't get protection, they would lose. And I just made up my mind when I got up to pro football that I was not going to give up on a play ever.
But could never win much, having only one winning season in the first 7 years, and eventually traded him to the New York Football Giants in 1967. But in 1969, the team found something. Led by Hall of Famers Carl Eller, Alan Page, and of course, the Purple People Eaters, the most dominant defense of its time, they earned a berth in Super Bowl IV. Now, they would ultimately lose the game 23-7 against the Kansas City Chiefs. But in 1972, the Vikings made a trade to reacquire Tarkenton and would go to 2 straight Super Bowls, losing them both, including losing to the only undefeated team in NFL history, the 1973 Miami Dolphins.
I know you wonder what it's like to lace up the shoes of a player stepping on the field without a thing to lose. The busters posing up the View on ESPN, asking me that stupid question. Think they'll do it again? Once again, I'm holding school about the thought of defeat. I got no losses on my table, so you can't take my seat. My perfect history would tell you that the record's complete. Stand up, you busters playing if you tasted defeat. Every year they try to bust out trying to capture the crown. I've been trying to tell you, busters, you can't play in our town. And the answer to your question is still the same. You want to go undefeated, you got to win every game. I know you wonder.
In 1975, the Vikings would start the season on a 10-game winning streak and will be favored to appear in the Super Bowl for a third straight year before the famous Hail Mary would end their chances. But they would be resilient and return to Super Bowl 11 the very next season, only to lose again, this time to the Oakland Raiders. Very similar to what the Bills would eventually do in the early 90s. Now we fast forward to 1998.
Gatorade.
H2O.
Gatorade.
H2O.
Water sucks. It really, really sucks. Water sucks.
No, stop
It
saying
really,
that.
really
You don't mean that.
sucks.
You're bad people.
When the Vikings would draft Hall of Famer Randy Moss, number 21 overall.
Next thing you know, on the bottom of that ticker said, with the 21st pick, the Minnesota Vikings select
wide receiver from Marshall University, Randy Moss.
Man, I told Coach Green, I said, man, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I will not disappoint you. I'm going to give you everything I got.
The 98 season would be a historical one for the Vikings. They would ultimately set the record, at the time at least, for the most points in a season. However, this time they would fall short of the Super Bowl, losing in overtime to the Dirty Birds of Atlanta, 30-27. Minnesota was never able to capitalize fully with Randy Moss's talents before trading him in 2005 to the Oakland Raiders. The Vikings were desperate to get over the hump and were looking for all avenues to get their first Super Bowl in franchise history, even if it meant putting all their hope on a retired 39-year-old Hall of Fame quarterback named Brett Favre in 2009. Everything seemed to work out fine initially, 12-4 season and an NFC Championship appearance. However, they fell short in overtime to the Saints, who would go on to win the Super Bowl that year. So, good, bad, I don't know.
Sends the Saints to the Super Bowl.
"2010 would be anything but successful, as they would finish the season 6-10. They fired their coach 10 weeks into the season, and their stadium would be destroyed by a snowstorm. Which prompted them to build US Bank Stadium, which finished construction in 2016 and will host Super Bowl 52 at the end of the 2017 season. But we'll come back to that. Now that brings us to last season. Well, first, let's give a little context. During minicamp of the 2016 season, Teddy Bridgewater had a horrendous non-contact knee injury, which was expected to have him out for a year and a half. So in response to that, they sent a first-round draft pick to Philly for Sam Bradford, who had a pretty good season. 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, pretty good. They decided not to pick up the player option for Adrian Peterson, who's the future Hall of Famer and the record holder for almost all of the rushing records in Vikings history, deciding instead to look to the draft and take running back Dalvin Cook in the second round. Now, with Teddy Bridgewater still injured and Bradford expected to be the opening day starter, the team needed to sign a backup quarterback, and so they decided on Case Keenum for that position. And just like so many times in his career, Sam Bradford went down with a knee injury that would sideline him for the entire season. The team would turn to career journeyman Case Keenum. Now, Keenum would lead the team to a 13-3 record and a berth in the NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, earlier I told you that US Bank Stadium would host Super Bowl 52. Well, here was the opportunity to play the Super Bowl at home for the first time in NFL history. All they had to do was beat the Philadelphia Eagles. The pressure and the high stakes of the game ended up being too much for the Vikings as they were blown out by the Eagles 38-7. Now, although Case Keenum had a career year, the team was led by their defense, which was either first or second in many defensive statistical categories. The team felt like they were only a quarterback away, however, from taking that next step. Lucky for them, there was a rare occurrence taking place in the NFL that offseason.
Well, here's where they are. Kirk Cousins has a visit set up with the Minnesota Vikings. That is expected to be tomorrow night. He's going to...
An experienced, talented, high-character quarterback became available this offseason by the way of the Washington Redskins. Just like every year, there's always a handful of teams that are in need of a quarterback. But the Vikings did something unprecedented that had never been done before to secure their target. 3 years, $84 million, fully guaranteed.
You like that? You like that?
And now we're here. OTAs are over. Minicamps are over. Training camp is over. Preseason is over. And now, we turn this Vikings team into Super Bowl champions.